Yate, my name is Aaron Slater. My clans are Kia'ani, Naizidina, Tsenachini, and Sotanea. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, and here at Solve, I work with my fantastic colleagues here at Solve and folks from around the Institute to lead the Indigenous community's work. Over the next 3 days, we will hear from some amazing Solver teams and partners who are working together on meaningful and innovative solutions to critical challenges in communities around the world. For those of you who are interested in diving deeper on these topics, consider joining us for the Indigenous and Anti-Racist Innovators Summit in Minneapolis, Minnesota on June 16th and 17th. Yeah, let's give it up for that. I'm excited to see you there. But for right now, I'm deeply honored to introduce our first Solver Funder Fireside Chat between Kristin Welch, founder and executive director of the Waking Women Healing Institute, and her partner at Vodafone America, June Sugiyama, director of Vodafone America's foundation. Waking Women works to protect against, heal from, and illuminate acts of settler violence, settler colonialism that result in violence against Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit relatives, as well as violence against the lands and waterways of this country. Kristin and her team are working to restore traditional matriarchal roles, governance systems, ecosystems of care that will ensure the health of mind, body, spirit, and emotion of this generation and generations to come. This is an especially meaningful conversation, given that today, May 5th, is National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Two-Spirit, and girls. Please join me in welcoming Kristin and June to the stage, and please join us in supporting this essential work. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Kristin, it's an honor for me to be here with you today. I'm inspired by your work at Waking Women Healing. So you're an MIT Solver, and you won the Vodafone America's Foundation Innovation for Women Prize for the Story Map project. So I want to talk about the project and the technology that it uses to tell stories about missing and murdered Indigenous women. So that's MMIW. And we also have a very unique relationship, so I want to talk about that. So we have a lot to cover within the short period of time. But first, though, I want to talk about today. Like Alex said, today is May 5th. It's a very important date, and it's significant to your work. So can you lead us by talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, first Poso Maunowiak, hello everybody. So today is the National Day of Awareness for MMIW, or Missing Murdered Indigenous Women. It's a day of action, of healing, of grief, but I think more importantly, resistance for us as Indigenous women to bring awareness to the rates in which we go missing and murdered, especially here in the US, it's 10 times higher than the national average. But it's a day of action and healing for our families to break through silence, intentional silencing of us as Indigenous people. So it's a call out to the world, to society, to change, to do better, to take a really deep look at yourself as institutions and what you're contributing to the epidemic of MMIW.
You know, I noticed that storytelling is a big part of your work. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I think as an Indigenous woman and Indigenous people, we're rooted in storytelling, especially storytelling that's connected to the land. She's our mother. She provides everything for us. So ArcGIS and Story Maps was like this really natural transition to bring awareness and visibility to Indigenous women and the violence that we're facing. And it tells the stories of our family members who are boots on the ground fighting against systems for visibility and action. They're on the ground when their family members go missing and murdered, creating search teams because law enforcement is not doing that. They're on the ground contacting senators and legislators at the state and federal level saying we need policy change, we need system response, we need the FBI to investigate our murders, and nothing's happening. So it's that story and that work that we want to highlight. We want to create sort of this space where other grassroots Indigenous people can find a hub, a source of how do we do this? How do we fight this big problem, this 500-year-old problem of systemic racism and colonialism that leads up to this problem? And the story maps allows us to do that. It can show the gaps in responses from law enforcement. It can show us how to improve those responses, and more importantly, how to grow movement that protects the future for that 7th generation.
You know, your storytelling really resonated with me, both personally and professionally. You know, through the recent pandemic and the rise of Asian hate, I was on a panel discussion, and someone from the audience asked, said, Asians need to speak up more. And when I heard that, I was really crushed, because I felt like Asians have been speaking up since the early 1800s with the Chinese Exclusion Act, the internment of the Japanese American, of which my father was also imprisoned, the murder of Vincent Chin, and so much more that's happening. So I think, people don't really want to listen, or it's hard for them to hear what the truth. But you put it in really clear sound bites, and I think that's what your project does. So this is the exciting part. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about your project.
Yeah, we use ArcGIS Online and story maps to collect data that just really doesn't exist for Indigenous people. That was like the first problem, is we're invisible in the data, we're invisible in the media. So it makes it really hard to get engaged in a problem that people know nothing about. There's that intentional silencing. So as an Indigenous person, having data sovereignty and being able to tell your story through these interactive maps, from doctrine of discovery, that's the root cause of how we got here, was an intentional land theft, all the way up to how the system upholds that violence against us today, whether it's the foster care system or resource extractive industries. And it engages the hearts and minds of people. It gives you the stats and the data, but it's the story, the connection to the heart level, that we're real human beings that this is affecting. This isn't a historical problem. It's still ongoing and happening to us today, and here's how you can get engaged.
Like I mentioned, it resonated with me not only personally but professionally, and I felt an urgency to reach out to my employees, and so in turn I reached out to you. Can you tell us all about, can you share how our relationship was?
I think between a nonprofit and a partner, Vodafone Foundation, and yourself, June, that was our ideal, dream relationship, where they listened to you. You listened to what our problems were, what our needs were. You understood as Indigenous people how much we're carrying in our backpack, that it's not just this solution, that we're tending to community, we're tending to suicide, we're tending to resource extraction, we're fighting for the land. And you simply said, how can we take some of that out? And you were very stern about it, no, we're gonna schedule this, we're gonna find you funding, we're gonna help you, and that's what we need, is people to stand in it with us to get engaged. And I think the relationship was built on trust, that and trusted us to do what we needed to do with the funding and supported. But it wasn't just funding, which is extremely important, but it was media relations and technical assistance, and here's how we can support you.
Yeah, I know our employees were really moved by your story. And we were happy to do some soul searching to see how much more we can do, what we can do to support you. And, like you said, money is one thing, but for example, Vodafone is an international technology company. We can leverage our global reach, our critical mass of employees and customers, and their expertise in engineering and, like you said, human resources and marketing. So, how else do you think companies can help?
Decolonize. Simply decolonize yourself. I think taking that internal look at yourself and really looking at your budgets and your funding streams, are they coming from banks that support resource extraction? Are you really willing to look at the policy and the way you're built and moving? Is it gender biased? Is it racist? Whose land are you on? And are you supporting those people? For me, that's the biggest thing, is decolonize yourself and make sure that you have BIPOC and Two-Spirit people at every level of decision making within your company and institution and corporation.
Well, Kristin, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and I'm sure it was the same with all of you. There's a lot of companies, people from companies out here and listening online. I hope that sharing our story encouraged you to do a little bit of soul searching to see how you can help. And talk to your solvers if you can. And in the next couple of days, if you run into Kristin, please stop and have a chat. Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you, Ravana.
Thank you.